Operation Epic Fury was a historic and overwhelming victory on the battlefield.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declared a decisive military victory after the United States and Iran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire, saying Tehran had no option but to strike a deal.
What has been agreed to, what's been stated, is the strait is open.
But Hegseth said American troops would remain in the region and that they stood ready to resume fighting if Iran failed to reach a negotiated settlement.
Yeah, we'll be hanging around. We're not going anywhere. We're going to make sure Iran complies with this ceasefire and then ultimately comes to the table and makes a deal.
Jessica Gnauer, an expert in international conflict at Australia's University of New South Wales, said the ceasefire is very fragile.
Still remains to be seen whether President Trump will at some stage decide that he does want to go for some kind of escalation in terms of boots on the ground. I wouldn't rule that out unless we actually see those US Marines withdrawn from the region, and then I would say, okay, we're now looking at a much sort of longer term and sustainable ceasefire.
Iran's letting ships go through. So they'll be that will be happening. They will be sailing.
Iran, which also claimed victory after agreeing to the ceasefire, said it would offer safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz in coordination with its armed forces. But the Iranian Navy warned that any ship attempting to sail without permission would be, quote, targeted and destroyed. Top U.S. General Dan Kane said the U.S. had sunk approximately 90% of Iran's regular naval fleet and destroyed most of its air defense systems and weapons factories. But experts say the broader strategic objectives do not appear to have been met, since the Iranian regime largely remains intact and Tehran may be more emboldened going forward. Meanwhile, fighting still raged across the region Wednesday as Israel launched its biggest attacks yet on Lebanon, and Iran struck Gulf neighbors' oil facilities.
I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. Fundamentally, we're on the right track. We got a lot more to do. We got a lot more that the Iranians are going to have to accept as part of this negotiation, but I think we've got a strong hand, and we're going to play it well.
I can't tell you how intense it was, how terrifying it was, how scary it was. The sound was very loud, very terrifying, and very scary, honestly.
There's something unbelievable. Destruction, very massive destruction. I mean, even someone who isn't afraid would become afraid. I feel fear and anxiety. Where is this country headed? What are we going to do with our lives? Where are we staying and where are we going? No one knows what's going to happen. We have children, livelihoods, property. People want to live. Enough. We've had enough of war.
Gulf states hope a cheap interceptor developed by Japanese firm Terra Drone and Ukrainian partners could be the answer to waves of Iranian attacks. Since the start of the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran, Tehran has launched large numbers of low-cost Shahed drones. U.S. forces and regional allies have largely relied on expensive missiles to stop them, rapidly depleting their air defense stockpiles. Terra Drone Chief Executive Toru Tokushige says the conflict has highlighted the limits of missile-based air defense.
So for this current war in the Middle East, Shahed drones are flying one after another from Iran toward Israel. From Tel Aviv to Tehran is about 994 miles, right? So those Shaheds are flying around 1,200 miles. And finally, people in Japan and overseas as well have come to understand just how extremely important these interceptor drones are, especially since missiles are running out in the Middle East.
Terra Drone says its A1 drones cost about $2,500 each. By contrast, each Patriot interceptor missile costs around $4 million. making them an expensive way to shoot down Shaheds, priced in the low tens of thousands.
Shooting missiles down with missiles might just be fine. But shooting a Shahed that costs around $31,000 with a missile that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, that kind of economic irrationality just isn't feasible anymore. And people are starting to realize that. So demand is extremely high. But among that, with the conflict in the Middle East happening now, and then in areas near Russia, like Poland and Europe, those areas are seeing particularly strong attention, or rather, strong interest in this technology.
Terra Drone began offering military sales last month through a partnership with Ukrainian startup Amazing Drones. The Terra A1 has not yet been battle-tested and is expected to be delivered to Ukraine's military for trials. Russia's foreign ministry said Wednesday that it had summoned Japan's ambassador in protest over Terra Drone's investment in Ukrainian interceptor drone technology. Moscow said relations with Tokyo have been reduced to zero over what it calls Japan's unfriendly stance.
Smugglers are increasingly using Belgium's shoreline to transport migrants to Britain since tighter controls began along the French coast. Footage from the Belgium Maritime and Coastal Services Agency shows volunteers pulling 19 people, only one with a life jacket, from a sinking dinghy last month.
It can kill you if you cross the channel and you pay a lot of money for it. It's really not worth it.
Police spokesperson Anne Berger said though numbers remain small, 17 boat departures this year, there are far more from Belgium than before.
Most of them leave from France, but since the French police are doing a lot more checks on the northern French coast, they also, the smuggling organizations, they're looking for alternatives, and they also come to the Belgian coast.
The numbers from Belgium are still dwarfed by the France-Britain route, where about 41,500 people were detected crossing the channel in small boats last year. Britain and France have cracked down on these kinds of small boats by introducing policies such as the one-in, one-out scheme. Under the agreement, a person who comes to Britain on a small boat can be detained and returned to France, and an equal number of migrants are then authorised to travel from France to Britain via a new legal route. EU border agency Frontex says smugglers use what's known as taxi boats, where a vessel departs from a quiet beach in Belgium with a small group, then travels along the coast to pick up points before crossing. Migrants pay about $2,300 to smugglers with no guarantees.
It's very dangerous. There's people being threatened. There's people being abused, sexually abused. Those things are being filmed to put pressure on the families, to have them pay more money. It's a criminal world, and it's better not to get involved.
More attempts are expected with better weather coming. Belgian Migration Minister Annelien van Bossut said in an email to Reuters, every boat that departs is one too many.
Produced and published at speed and capable of reaching new audiences, these Lego-styled animation movies coming out of Iran, mocking US President Donald Trump, have surfaced on social media. They are the work of a group called Explosive Media, who have regularly shared videos during America's war with Iran. Online extremism journalist for Wired, David Gilbert, says they're a new frontier for nation-states.
We're seeing a new type of kind of online warfare where these young internet-savvy activists in countries across the globe who have access to these AI tools that they never had access to before are able to produce this type of cutting satire and content that is resonating with a huge audience. And it's something we haven't really seen at this scale before.
Some videos have racked up over 100,000 views and have been shared by official Iranian government accounts.
It's clear that they are aware of it and they have sanctioned it and they think it's a good thing. And so they know that while they can continue to kind of press their traditional message of, you know, no surrender and death to America, this other effort is able to speak to a completely different audience, one that maybe not previously have been open to hearing an Iranian point of view.
It's unclear who Explosive Media are, but the group say they are, quote, the independent team behind Iranian Lego animations. While clearly animation and not real, Gilbert said videos like these could still have a major impact.
This kind of rapid turnaround of really high quality, slick content is an incredibly worrying development and something that could potentially have a massive impact on real world events, depending on the world leaders who are involved.
The parents of late actor Matthew Perry was seen leaving a Los Angeles courthouse Wednesday after a drug dealer dubbed the Ketamine Queen was sentenced to 15 years in prison in connection with their son's death in 2023. In September, Jasveen Singha pled guilty to 5 felony drug counts stemming from the death of the Friends star. She admitted to running a stash house for illegal narcotics out of her home in the North Hollywood district of Los Angeles, and acknowledged selling 51 vials of ketamine to a go-between dealer Eric Fleming, who then sold the doses to Perry through the actor's personal assistant Kenneth Iwamasa. Fleming, Iwamasa, and physicians Mark Chavez and Salvador Plasencia have pleaded guilty to drug offenses. Plasencia was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. Chavez got 8 months of home confinement. Singha's defense attorney Mark Garagos took issue with the disparity of the charges in sentencing so far.
There's no way that Jasveen is 5 times more culpable than the person who injected Matthew Perry with the drug or the doctor who got the drug. To me, it's absurd in the literal meaning of the word.
On October 28, 2023, Perry was found by his live-in personal assistant floating face down and lifeless in a hot tub at his Los Angeles home. An autopsy report later revealed that Perry died from the acute effects of ketamine, which combined with other factors in causing him to lose consciousness and drown. Perry had acknowledged decades of substance abuse that overlapped with the height of his fame playing the sardonic but charming Chandler Bing on the 1990s hit NBC television comedy.